Hello and welcome back to Everything Boats with Captain Frank Lanier, where we discuss boats and boating, from maintenance and repairs to seamanship and safety, as well as everything in between. This podcast is a companion to my YouTube channel of the same name, so if you like and find it useful, be sure to subscribe and please check out my YouTube channel as well, where you'll find hundreds of informative videos on pretty much every boating topic imaginable. So today, we're going to be talking about boating emergencies, disasters, things everybody worries about: fire, sinking, running aground, towing a boat, damage control. We're going to be talking about all these things in this podcast. First up, your boat's on fire. Now what? Just dropped anchor in that quaint waterfront town harbor after an awesome day on the water. As you secure the anchor and head back to the helm to turn off the engine, you notice tendrils of blue smoke rising from the engine compartment vent, just as somebody down below shouts, "Fire!" What happens in the next 60 seconds will likely determine whether you'll spend the evening enjoying tropical drinks and that all-you-can-eat rib special at Lord Rumbottom's Tavern, or worrying over the fine print in your insurance policy. Do you have a fire action plan in place, and are crew members familiar with it? Are there adequate numbers of fire extinguishers on board? Are they operational? Does the crew know where they're located and how to operate them? These are just some of the questions all boat owners should be able to answer in the affirmative well in advance of an onboard fire. Let's take a look at how to increase your chances of landing in the barbecue rib rather than the blackened boat category. The ABCs of fire. As with all battles, you have to learn about your enemy before you can fight them safely and effectively. Fires are classified by the type of material that's burning. Class A fires are fueled by combustible solid materials such as wood, paper, cloth, and plastics. Class B fires involve flammable liquids and gases, gasoline, diesel, varnishes, and propane, while Class C fires are powered by energized electrical circuits or equipment. As the classifier is not broken down any further, differentiating between diesel and kerosene, for example, it's easier to think simply of a Class A fire as being solids, Class B fires as liquids, and Class C fires as electrical. Fire extinguishers are rated by the class of fire their extinguishing agent is effective against. A Type C extinguisher is for use on electrical fires only, while a Type ABC multi-purpose extinguisher can be used on all three classes: solids, flammable liquids, and electrical. It's important to match the type of extinguishing agent with the class of fire you're up against. Water is effective against a Class A fire, but spraying it at a frying pan of burning oil, a Class B fire, can spread flames throughout the galley, while using it against a Class C fire could result in shock or electrocution. As of 2022, new U.S. Coast Guard regulations call for extinguishers that use UL, Underwriters Laboratories, designations, a number-letter combination that indicates the square footage of the fire the extinguisher can put out and the type of fire it is effective against. For example, a 5-B extinguisher indicates an extinguisher capable of putting out a Class B fire up to 5 square feet in size. Multi-purpose extinguishers, as the name implies, are effective against different classes of fires. They take the guesswork out of which fire extinguisher to use, saving time when every second counts. However, they do have downsides. Most use a dry chemical powder to smother fire that, while effective, is also highly corrosive and difficult to remove afterwards. In some cases, a small engine fire, for example, they can actually cause more damage to the engine than the fire itself. They also have to be aimed directly at the base of the fire to be effective, which may be difficult in a cramped engine compartment with limited access. Gaseous clean agent extinguishers such as CO2, halon, halocarbon, Fe-241, and the like are non-conductive, leave no residue, and can be used to simply flood an enclosed compartment, snuffing out the fire inside. While this flooding approach works well in the engine compartment, it's not as effective in open areas where the gas disperses much more quickly. Because of this, the most common recommendation is to use a clean agent extinguisher in the engine room and multi-purpose units throughout the rest of the vessel. Fire extinguisher checks and placement. The first check is ensuring that you have the correct number of UL-rated U.S. Coast Guard approved fire extinguishers on board. This is going to be based on the size of your vessel. Verify each is in good working order, readily accessible, and properly mounted in appropriate, easily visible locations adjacent to exit paths. A good rule of thumb is that you should never have to travel more than half the length of your boat to reach an extinguisher. Portable extinguishers should be located near the galley, engine compartment, and in all living spaces, bearing in mind that the minimum requirements are just that. It's always good to have additional units on board. A common problem I see as a marine surveyor is a vessel having the correct number of fire extinguishers on board, but locating all of them below decks where a galley fire could prevent access from the helm. Sailboats are particularly susceptible in this regard, as layouts typically place the galley near the companionway to aid in ventilation. The recommendation here, of course, is simply to mount an additional unit at the helm or in the cockpit where it's available to the vessel's operator the minute a fire is discovered. While mounting an extinguisher in an easily visible location is preferred, ensure that installations for those mounted out of sight, such as inside of a cockpit locker, includes a weatherproof fire extinguisher label outside where it can easily be seen. Fire extinguishers have different maintenance schedules based on their type and extinguishing agent. In addition to routine monthly checks for physical damage, low gauge pressure, and the like, it's also a good idea to have units professionally inspected and tagged annually. The portable dry chemical extinguishers so popular with boaters due to both their effectiveness and relatively cheap cost should be considered disposable and replaced every 6 to 8 years. It's cheap insurance, and you can put the old ones to good use by allowing family and crew to practice putting out fake fires ashore. Everybody on board should know how to safely use a fire extinguisher before the need arises. Safety planning and fire prevention. As with most potential problems on board, sinking, falling overboard, running out of margarita mix, the best protection against fire is to prevent it from occurring in the first place. A fire can occur anywhere on board. However, many start in the engine room, typically from electrical malfunctions, followed by fuel leaks and overheating. The galley is another likely spot due to cooking mishaps and so on, although to a lesser extent than popularly thought. Prevention may be the best defense, but equally important is having a fire action plan in place to deal with fires should they occur. Post diagrams of your vessel showing the location of all portable extinguishers, as well as the controls and instructions on how to operate permanently mounted units, those in the engine room, for example. These instructions should be placed in prominent locations. Other good information to provide would be primary and alternate escape routes for all spaces, particularly sleeping areas, and the location of cutoff valves and switches for electrical, fuel, LPG, and CNG systems. Run through what would happen in each area of your boat if you had to get out quick, and when planning emergency action items and escape routes, physically walk through them to confirm they actually work. If your evening meal goes up in smoke, can you reach the remote solenoid shutoff or the stove LPG system without having to reach over the flames? Is that forward cabin hatch actually large enough to fit through in the event of a fire? Can it be opened with the dinghy stored on deck? These are the types of questions you want to ask before staking your life on the answer. Review your boat's fire safety plan with passengers and crew each time prior to getting underway, and hold fire drills regularly to ensure everyone knows what to do in the event of an emergency. Posting simple instructions and providing training on operation of VHF radios and how to determine vessel location, reading coordinates from a chart plotter, for example, will ensure everybody can call for help and tell rescue organizations where the vessel is located if required to. In the event a fire occurs while at the marina, the best course of action will likely be to evacuate the boat, dial 911, and let professional firefighters handle it. Remember, fire extinguishers are small, quick fixes. If you can't put out the fire with one extinguisher, 2 at the most, then get out. For fires away from the dock, you'll have to be more self-reliant, as evacuation will be more difficult and assistance likely will be longer in coming. Your response when dealing with an onboard fire while anchored or underway will ultimately be determined by existing conditions, the type of the fire, the location, and the like. However, in general, one of the first steps should be notifying the Coast Guard utilizing channel 16 on your VHF radio. Letting someone know you're in trouble sooner rather than later gives rescue agencies or Good Samaritans nearby a quicker response time should assistance be needed. Once contact is established, pass crucial information as quickly as possible. Location, type and size of vessel, number of people on board, boat name, and so on, as there may not be a second chance should the fire knock out your electronics. If the fire occurs while underway, first thing is to stop the boat, paying attention to your surroundings while maneuvering to avoid other vessels or running aground to the extent possible. If the fire is in the engine room, one of the worst things to do is the very first thing everybody wants to do: open up the compartment to see what's going on in there. Doing so provides an additional rush of oxygen, which can turn an otherwise smoldering fire into an abandoned ship type conflagration. The best way to fight an engine room fire is having an appropriately sized clean agent automatic extinguisher system mounted within the engine compartment. Automatic is a key word here, but there should also be a manual discharge control located outside the engine compartment. This is so that the unit can be immediately discharged in the event you or a crew member become aware of a fire before the auto-release mechanism kicks in. At a minimum, fire ports should be installed to fight engine compartment fires. These are small ports or openings that allow you to discharge a portable clean agent fire extinguisher directly into the engine room without opening hatches or access panels. Ensure your fire port is big enough to accept the extinguisher nozzle, can be opened and accessed from outside the engine compartment, and is located so that the portable fire extinguisher can be properly discharged in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. For example, able to be discharged in an upright position. Regardless if you use a portable unit and fire port or an automatic extinguisher, be sure to shut down the engine as soon as possible. A running engine can pump fire suppressant out of the engine compartment while continuing to suck in fresh air. Most automatic units have an option for installing an automatic engine shutdown, an excellent idea that should be seriously considered, particularly for diesel engines. As clean agent units kill the fire without damaging the engine and its components, boaters can often restart their engines after locating and correcting the initial problem and return to port under their own power. Other good stuff to know: fire extinguishers should be inspected monthly by the vessel's operator for corrosion, loss of pressure, blocked discharge ports, damaged mounting brackets, and so on. They should also be inspected and tagged annually by a qualified service facility. Non-serviceable or disposable portable fire extinguishers should be replaced immediately after use, or if the extinguisher's gauge needle is in the empty area. Install marine-grade smoke detectors in vessels where appropriate. This would be vessels with like enclosed accommodation spaces, galleys, and the like. Portable electric heaters are a leading cause of boat and marina fires. Never leave them on unattended or to protect your vessel during winter layup. Heaters, energized light bulbs, and the like are a poor substitute for properly winterizing your boat, both from a fire safety standpoint and because it's not uncommon to lose power during severe winter weather. Keep your boat's engine in good repair, making regular checks for fuel system leaks as well as cooling system problems that could lead to overheating. Correct electrical system problems promptly and professionally using marine-grade wiring and components. Store portable gas cans in suitable storage racks above decks. Outboard engines and other fuel-powered equipment should be stored securely on deck or in a separate isolated storage area vented to the outside. Turn off all LPG and CNG appliances and close all cylinder valves prior to going to bed or leaving the vessel. Cylinder valves should always be closed when the system is not in use. Avoid using candles, but if you must, place them upright in a suitable, stable holder away from curtains and furnishings. Never leave a burning candle unattended, and keep candles, matches, lighters, and other source of flame out of reach of children. Reduce the chance of fire by practicing good housekeeping. Remove trash, oily cleaning rags, and other such debris daily. Store flammables, such as varnish, paint thinners, and the like, ashore when possible. Never use portable non-marine type hibachis or grills inside your boat due to the potential for tipping over. Most can't be mounted, and CO buildup. Don't leave your galley stoves and grills unattended while cooking and turn them off immediately after use. You should also never use your stoves and grills and such for comfort heating due to carbon monoxide issues. Finally, keep your stoves, ovens, and grills clean and free from grease and oil buildup, and always keep curtains and other flammables away. Next up, let's talk about damage control and how to keep your boat from sinking. While exclamations like, "we're out of hot dogs," or "the toilet seems to be clogged," are bad enough, the one that really strikes fear in a boater's heart is, where's all this water coming from? Uncontrolled flooding is one of the most insidious emergencies a boater can face, one that can not only sink a boat outright, but can also lead to instability and capsize. Many boat owners train and purchase equipment to save themselves or those on board, but aside from a few wooden plugs and a vague plan of action, very few are adequately prepared to mount a credible attempt to save the boat itself should flooding due to a hull breach occur. Here's how to both improve your odds and give your boat a fighting chance. First up, let's talk a little bit about damage control basics. My first introduction to damage control basics was as a newly minted Coast Guard seaman attending training aboard the Navy's USS Buttercup. Yeah, look it up. It was an eye-opening experience that continues to guide my own damage control philosophy some 30 years later. As with any emergency situation, advanced preparation is the key to dealing with a hull breach. It should include everything from planning for possible causes of flooding to assembly of a proper damage control kit or a DC kit. Damage control itself can be categorized into a number of steps, from prevention and preparation to damage assessment, control, and temporary repairs. Topics such as proper and timely distress signaling, temporary repairs, emergency pumps, and rescue are also important. But the focus here is to find, access, and stop, or at least mitigate, the source of uncontrolled water entry into the hull. The focus is also on fiberglass hulls, although many of the techniques can also be applied to other vessels. Flooding fun facts. Well, they're not really fun, but they are facts you should know. The volume of water that enters a boat is proportional to the square root of the depth of the hole and the square of the hole's radius. A 2-inch hole that is 1 foot below the waterline can fill a 55-gallon drum in 42.4 seconds. A 1-inch hole that is 2 foot below the waterline is forcing your boat's weight to increase at 240 pounds per minute or 4 pounds per second. And as the boat fills with water, the effective hole depth increases, forcing faster water ingress. Early detection is crucial when dealing with flooding. The more time you have to address the problem, the better chances your boat and possibly you will survive. Precautions such as a high water bilge alarm system and bilge pump on indicators at each helm position will provide the maximum benefit in this regard. However, these should be part of your pre-planning preparedness strategy. As mentioned earlier, our purpose here is to highlight actions to consider when a hull breach occurs. The first goal in a flooding situation is to find the leak and stop it, or at least bring it under control. Without first-hand experience, it's almost impossible for the average boater to imagine how quickly flooding can occur, even during a relatively small leak, such as a ruptured hose or damaged through-hull fitting. More water in the boat can make a leak harder to find in the first place, which is another reason why time is so critical. It's also important to note that the added weight of floodwater can negatively affect vessel stability and operation. This additional weight may also give you an early sign that you're taking on water as the boat becomes more sluggish, harder to steer, and slower or behaves differently. Hull breaches. Hull breaches can be divided into two broad categories: structural breaches and below the waterline equipment failure. A structural breach of the hull typically occurs as a result of impact damage from grounding or collision with an object, although failure of the hull due to other reasons, severe delamination, broken stringers, and inadequate design, can also happen. Flooding due to equipment failure can include anything from a broken seacock to a ruptured hose. While equipment failure can often be traced to improper installation or lack of maintenance, there can also be some crossover between the two, such as a rudder loss or stern drive damage due to grounding. Assembling a damage control kit. The two best things to tackle a hull breach with are a cool head and a well thought out damage control kit. From shower curtains and beer can koozies to t-shirts and throw pillows held in place with your foot, most every boat will have something on board that can be used for damage control in a pinch. While such on-the-fly repairs can be effective, why risk being unable to MacGyver a solution in an emergency when you can easily buy or assemble a proper damage control kit beforehand? A DC kit should be tailored to meet the needs of your particular boat. A small runabout will obviously have neither the space or need to carry the same kit as an offshore cruising vessel. All boats should carry some form of damage control kit, however, which should be stored in a readily accessible, dedicated bag or container labeled damage control kit. There's no hard and fast rule of what they should contain, however, the time to think about it is now. Here's a good starting point for assembling your own damage control kit. Number one, 2 or 3 waterproof flashlights. A mix of handheld and headlamps works great. Number 2, hatchet or small axe. This is what you would use to chop away interior furnishings or split wood wedges. Number 3, a heavy hammer or maul. 4, folding hand saw. Number 5, a utility knife. 6, a pry bar. Number 7, marine caulk, such as boat life caulk, that cures fast and bonds underwater. Number 8, tapered soft wooden plugs of various sizes. Number 9, soft wooden wedges, various sizes. Number 10, foam emergency plug, again, various sizes. Screwdrivers, various sizes. You can see there's a pattern here, right? Because you want to be able to address whatever happens. So that's why the various sizes. Number 12, stainless steel mousing or seizing wire. 13, duct tape. Is any kind of kit really complete without it? The Gorilla brand works well, I've found. Number 14, butyl tape, which is a heavy, sticky, ropey kind of tape that's good for wrapping plugs and stuff and sticking in holes. Number 15, self-fusing silicone tape, such as a rescue tape. Number 16, grease tape. Number 17, spray can of expanding foam. This is great for filling voids and gaps around wooden patches. Number 18, sheets of rubber or rubberized cloth, various size squares. Old raincoat sleeves or pant legs or cut tire inner tube works well for this. Number 19, hose clamps, various sizes. 20, C-clamps. 21, duct seal compound, aka monkey poop. Number 22, wax toilet bowl rings. You'd be surprised, but these work really well to seal gaps around shafts and glands. Number 23, twine and or paracord. 24, wire ties, assorted sizes and lengths. 25, a couple of 2x4s. 26, one sheet of thin 1/4 inch or 5/16 inch plywood, pre-cut to various size squares. Slightly larger pre-cut squares of thick felt or thin foam rubber gaskets will help wood patches seal against the hull. Number 27, nails. 28, square drive or self-tapping or self-drilling rust-resistant screws, along with a matching hand driver or battery-operated drill with a driver extension. These will be used to secure wood patches to the hull. 29, utility snips. And 30, underwater epoxy putty or a fiberglass repair kit. And I'll add one thing about that last item. While they have their place in a DC kit, epoxy compounds or fiberglass repair kits will be of no use for an immediate stop the flooding situation. For starters, just because they cure underwater, that doesn't mean they'll bond. Most will not stick to a wet surface, especially a hole that's under pressure. The surfaces to be bonded must also be completely immobile. Epoxy can't bond surfaces that are flexing or moving in relationship to each other. Cure time can also be greatly affected by temperature. Colder water can add days to advertised cure time. Next up, we're going to talk about access. In a perfect world, a hull breach would never happen. But if it did, it would be in an easily accessible location. With the adequate hull access, a hull can be more readily found and hopefully stopped by something as simple as a plug, a plywood patch, or whatever method resourcefulness provides. Regardless of the training, equipment, and ingenuity a boat owner possesses, it all amounts to nothing if a leak can't be found and accessed. Fiberglass boats can be notoriously bad when it comes to providing even minimal internal access to the hull. The use of one-piece pans and liners almost guarantees a crew dealing with a structural hull breach will be faced with water gushing from multiple holes for wire runs, piping, or ducting, and no clear idea of just where the damage is located. The best option in such cases will likely be battlefield-type surgery to remove internal furnishings and cut access holes into the liner in efforts to expose the hull and find the breach. One reason that having the proper tools, saws, pry bars, and axes readily available when needed is imperative. Despite your best efforts, access to a leak may be impossible due to either location or a leak being already underwater by the time a problem is discovered. In such cases, isolating the space to prevent flooding of the entire vessel is the preferred option, although only for boats with watertight bulkheads, something not found on the vast majority of recreational vessels. Another possible option might be gently beaching the boat if you're close to shore. Assuming the hull configuration is suitable for it, it's safe to do so, and there is nearby soft sand or mud bottom. Just keep in mind that beaching the boat may increase incoming water flow, something that must be considered against the benefits of successful beaching. Once a leak is found, next up is a realistic assessment of the damage or nature of flooding, as well as the odds of successfully addressing it. In some cases, flooding may be stopped by simply closing a seacock. Others, such as a structural breach, will likely not be as easy. While the hope when tackling a hull breach is that it can be completely sealed, the reduction of flooding to a manageable level is the most likely scenario. The difference between the two is that a leak can be managed by bilge or emergency pumps, while flooding cannot and will eventually lead to sinking unless addressed. In addition to ascertaining the extent of damage, another part of this initial assessment is danger to the crew should they attempt a repair. Damage rarely occurs under ideal conditions, which means other factors such as darkness, heavy weather, loss of power, poor access, rate of flooding, etc., must also be considered when making the decision to attempt repairs or make preparations for abandoning ship. Suspect areas. Unless you've struck something, run aground, or know where the breach is located, the first places to consider are all hull penetrations below the waterline, such as seacocks, stuffing boxes, shaft, and rudder glands. Other weak areas to check include shaft log hoses, the section of hose joining the shaft log to the shaft gland or stuffing box, hose clamps, as well as hoses located in out-of-the-way areas, toilet intakes, sanitation discharge hoses, cockpit drains, and the like, that may not get looked at on a regular basis, although they should be. If you have struck an object or grounded, then that would indicate where the initial search would begin. Pull up floorboards, open hatches, and clear lockers in efforts to determine where the leak is coming from. Controlling the flood. Once the damage has been evaluated and a determination made that it's safe to proceed with repairs, now is the time to apply your training, preparation, and ingenuity. Impact damage to a fiberglass hull will likely result in a jagged, uneven split rather than a nice round hole, so don't be afraid to use your imagination. That bacon sheet slathered with caulk and screwed into place may be the perfect patch. You also don't need to worry about neatness or how pretty the repair looks. It's only temporary and just needs to be effective at stopping the leak. Once the flooding is stopped, you can always go back and improve the strength of the repair if needed. Foam or expansion style plugs can be jammed into smaller holes. Stuffing rubber sheeting, towels, or rags coated with marine caulk or similar items into them can also be effective. These can also be wrapped around wooden plugs and wedges before driving them into place, which helps fill the hole, provide a better seal, and keep the plug or wedge in place. Wooden plugs and wedges should be of soft wood such as pine or fir. Soft wood wedges can be more easily split to fit different hole sizes and more readily conforms to irregular hole sizes. Softwood also compresses when driven into a breach and will absorb water and swell, improving the seal. You can also use multiple plugs or wedges to seal large or irregularly shaped holes. Items such as cushions or mattress can be used to plug larger holes, as can plywood patches, which can be nailed or screwed into place. As water will be entering the hull under pressure, plugs and patches may also need to be shored or braced into place. That's the purpose of the aforementioned tubophores. However, free your mind and think outside the box when the need arises. A boat hook, a table leg, or even a sturdy shower curtain rod can also be used in a pinch. In some cases, a collision mat, sail, piece of canvas, or even a heavy trash bag, if strong enough to be used and not sucked in, can be lowered over the side and held into place by straps and water pressure. While this type of emergency repair may be worth a shot at certain cases, a large breach or one that can't be located, for example, my personal preference is to concentrate on repairs that can be attempted from inside the hull. The effectiveness of a collision mat or similar item can be hampered by hull shape, heavy seas, or even location of the breach itself. Another downside is that effective deployment will also likely require that somebody enter the water to place and secure the mat in position. Not a desirable option even under the best of circumstances. A split or ruptured hose or pipe can be wrapped with tape or rubber strips secured in place with hose clamps, twines, or wire ties, while a failed seacock or through hull can be sealed with a plug. It's also good to remember that sink drains and other above the waterline through hulls can become submerged due to flooding, possibly allowing water to back siphon into the hull if not plugged or otherwise secured. Finally, I'll close with this. As with all safety training, the time to learn damage control techniques is before they're needed. Planning and preparation beforehand will help ensure both you and your boat have a fighting chance should the need arise. Next, let's talk a little bit about grounding and what you should and shouldn't do if it occurs. Every boater will experience it sooner or later, that stomach-clenching feeling of arrested forward motion during a draft exceeds water level event, aka grounding. What you do immediately after a grounding can make the difference between a barely noteworthy discussion at the Yacht Club Tiki Bar or a harrowing tale on par with the Poseidon Adventure. While every grounding will have its own nuances to deal with, the following tips should help in most any situation. The first piece of advice would be to have a grounding action plan in place before you need it. Trying to decide what to do after you're grounded wastes time, which may be running out if the tide is falling or if other circumstances, weather, waves, whatever, can worsen your situation. Quick, decisive action may save the day with only a few scratches to your hull and your ego. When developing your plan, consider not only extra items you may need, easily portable anchor and a rod, etc., but also the type of boat you have. A full keel sailboat, for example, is less susceptible to damage than a powerboat featuring props and rudders that extend below the keel. On the other hand, for sailboats with a centerboard, simply raising the board may be all that's needed to free yourself. If your boat is more likely to experience damage when grounding or while trying to unground, your plan needs to take that into consideration as well. Now we're going to go over what I like to call Captain Frank's grounding checklist. Number one, check on the passengers and crew. The first thing to do after grounding is to ensure that everyone is okay. A sudden stop when running aground can send people and objects flying. Number two, secure the engine. Place the engine in neutral or drop all sails if you're sailing and inspect the bilges to see if your boat is taking on water. I recommend shutting the engine off as well, as this will prevent the engine from sucking up mud and sand, etc., which could lead to overheating. Also, depending on how you are aground, your engine cooling water intake may be above water. Number three, check for damage. Try to determine if you've sustained damage to the hull or running gear, paying particular attention to stuffing boxes, rudder post packing glands, and through hulls. Even if there's no apparent damage, monitor the bilges once you're ungrounded, while underway, and when you arrive back at the dock. Number four, check the bottom type. Knowing what you've grounded on, rock, soft mud, hard sand, coral, or whatever, will help determine the best course of action to free yourself. If you're not sure, bottom information can be found on your charts or possibly determined by scooping up a sample with your anchor. Number five, verify the state of the tide. Knowing the state of the tide is crucial after grounding. A soft grounding during a rising tide may mean the best option is simply to wait. Grounding on a falling tide means you'll have less time to extricate yourself before the water level drops. Tidal and current flow information is broadcast on VHF weather channels and is also readily available on most modern chart plotters. Observing current flow and tide lines ashore or on a fixed navigation aid are also good ways to check the local state of the tide. There are also apps aplenty for tide. You can get them for your tablet or your smartphones. Number six, locate deeper water. Figure out why you ran aground in the first place. Many people run aground and get themselves refloated only to run aground 30 seconds later. Take a few minutes to consult a chart plotter, or whatever you have available and look at the buoys and stuff to see why you ran aground. Don't automatically assume deeper water is behind you. If you've grounded on a shoal or a reef, the closest deep water may actually lie in front of you. In some areas, you can read water depth by color, but in less clear waters, quickly take soundings around the boat using a lead line or maybe a long boat hook. You may also be able to use your dinghy to survey the water around your boat. Outfitting your dinghy with a fixed or handheld depth sounder will be a big help in this regard. Now, let's talk about floating your boat. When considering what action to take after grounding, keep the sage advice of old Hippocrates in mind. First, do no harm. For a hard grounding, when you've struck a reef or a rocky bottom and sustained significant damage, staying put until professional help arrives is typically the best approach. Freeing a damaged boat could easily result in sinking once the boat reaches deeper water. For soft groundings with a little or no damage, the following tactics may help get you afloat. Number one, powering off. Attempting to power off is probably the first reaction for most boaters immediately after grounding. Before using your engine to power off, however, make sure it's pumping water. Verify that the intake is in the water, not sucking up sand, mud, or other gunk from the bottom. You'll also want to keep an eye on the temperature gauge and make sure water is flowing freely from the exhaust. If you gently slid up on a shoal bow first, you may be able to power off in reverse, back the way you came, until reaching deeper water. Moving passengers from side to side or swinging the rudder from port to starboard while backing down may roll your boat enough to break free. Boats with twin engines can also alternate bursts of throttle between the port and starboard engines while reversing to amplify this side-to-side motion. Always check your boat's orientation when trying to back off. It could have spun around after hitting bottom or due to the effects of wind and tide, angling your stern towards shallow water instead. If you struck the shoal at an angle, you may be able to power off by turning the rudder hard towards deeper water and throttling up in an effort to spin the bow back towards it. Twin-engine boats can try to spin the bow by placing the engine closest to deep water in reverse and then the other in forward, once sure that your props are clear of the bottom. If your running gear extends below the keel or it could be touching bottom in any of the above situations, you'll want to try other tactics to minimize damage. This could include trimming up your outdrives or your outboard engines to clear them of the bottom. Depending on wind speed and direction, sailboats may be able to heel the boat over by hoisting the main. Heeling reduces draft and breaks suction, which, when combined with the thrust of the engine, may do the trick. Number two, drop some pounds. If it's safe to do so, loading people or heavier items into the dinghy can often reduce your draft enough to free your boat. You can also reduce weight by emptying water tanks or using your dinghy to ferry items ashore. Sometimes simply launching the dinghy itself can make a difference. Another option, providing the conditions are safe enough to allow it, is to let passengers or crew enter the water, both to reduce weight and possibly unground the boat by giving it a good shove. You may be able to simply move weight forward and reduce the draft aft. And if you're lucky, then be able to push the boat off. But under no circumstance should you use the engine while people are in the water. Number three, how about a lift? You may be able to use the wave action or the wake of a passing boat to lift your boat clear enough to power into deeper water. The trick is timing bursts of the throttle in the right direction as the boat lifts clear of the bottom. For this to work, you have to know where deep water is, and your running gear has to be clear of the bottom. This method should not be used if you are aground on a hard or rocky bottom. Number four, kedging. Kedging involves setting an anchor in deeper water and then trying to winch the boat free, typically in conjunction with thrust from the engine. It's easier with smaller boats where you can easily throw a small anchor towards deep water, but it's more difficult for larger vessels with heavier ground tackle. In this case, the safest deployment method is often using the dinghy to ferry out the anchor. Speaking of anchors, it may sound odd, but depending on your situation, you may also want to put your anchor out when you're aground. Safely, try to get the anchor as far away from the boat as possible in deep water. Then place as much strain on the anchor line as possible. This will prevent your boat from going any further aground due to wakes or current shifts. Deploying your anchor may be the difference between floating off the next high tide or facing a much more in-depth removal process. Whatever your action plan is, personnel and vessel safety should be paramount. If there are extenuating circumstances, darkness approaching, deteriorating weather, don't hesitate to call for professional help. This is the time that a service contract with a professional towing company such as Sea-Tow is invaluable. If a life-threatening situation exists, such as the possibility of sinking, don't hesitate to request assistance from the Coast Guard. While the Coast Guard is no longer in the business of providing routine towing service during non-life-threatening groundings, they can provide other assistance, such as contacting a commercial towing company for you, and will monitor your situation once notified. Finally, we'll close with this bit of sage-old advice from Captain Frank himself. Don't be embarrassed. Everybody runs aground at some point. And as I've always heard, there's two kind of boaters, those that have run aground and those that will run aground. Finally, let's talk about how to give someone a tow the right way. Despite the proliferation of commercial towing companies, there will be times when a fellow mariner can arrive on scene and offer assistance faster than a professional first responder. Let's take a look at what you need to know in order to protect yourself and those you're trying to help. First off, we're going to talk about the basics of towing. While providing a non-emergency tow, in other words, a boat and the occupants are not in any immediate danger, may be the most common form of assistance. That doesn't mean it's commonly done correctly. Towing is not simply a matter of tossing Bubba your ratty dock line and goosing the throttle. Before offering a tow, there are things you as the captain will be required to know, both from a practical and legal responsibility standpoint. No set of guidelines will be able to cover every variable you'll encounter. However, the following tips should be useful in most any towing situation. That being said, let's talk about the 12 tips for towing that Captain Frank, that'd be me, recommends. First of all, number one, take a moment to assess the situation when arriving at the disabled vessel. Everyone wants to lend a hand whenever possible, but you have the responsibility to do so without placing yourself in danger or elevating the situation of the other vessel. For example, a boat that's aground could have sustained significant damage, causing it to sink once towed into deeper water. Tip 2, when towing, have the disabled boat pass the tow line over to the tow boat. This lets the towing vessel easily cast off once the tow is complete. A nylon anchor rod is ideal for this as it typically is easily available, is long, allowing for length adjustments, and provides good shock absorbing qualities due to the nylon's stretchiness. Tip 3, if the towing vessel has an on-centerline towing fixture, a pylon for skiing for example, it might make a good place to attach a tow line, assuming it's robust enough. Otherwise, you'll want to make a towing bridle. A simple bridle can be made by running a stout line between your two stern cleats. Attach the towing line to it using a bowline so that the loop can slide along your bridle. Keep the bridle loose enough to provide room for the tow line to slide freely, but not so loose that it could come in contact with your propeller. Tip number 4, establish communications before starting the tow and keep in constant touch throughout the tow. Using your VHF on a working or non-emergency channel will likely be the most common means of communication. However, cell phones or even hand signals will work. For the latter, make sure everyone understands the basic hand signals that you'll be using. Stop, slow down, speed up, release the tow, and the like. Tip number 5, once the tow line is attached to both vessels, take the slack out of the tow line slowly until the full load is achieved, at which point you can then throttle up to a suitable towing speed. Towing tip number 6, always agree on where the disabled vessel will be towed prior to heading out. It's also a good idea to have a contingency plan in place in case something goes wrong. In other words, the weather starts deteriorating, you get low on fuel or whatever. Tip number 7, maintain a tow watch during the tow, both to make sure the towed vessel is okay and to ensure that the tow line doesn't foul your propeller. Towing tip number 8, if towing in open water, increase the length of the tow line. This not only puts some safety distance between the two vessels, but it also increases the shock absorbing qualities of your tow rope. If towing in larger waves, adjust the tow line so that both boats ride in sync with each other at the wave crest or troughs, whichever one. Boats that are out of sync while towing can experience significant shock loading, causing boat damage, such as ripped out cleats, and injury to those on board. Towing tip number 9, shorten up tow lines in calm waters or when maneuvering in close quarters, such as approaching a boat ramp or dock. Always remember that just because the towboat stops, that doesn't mean the towed boat will quickly do the same. Towing tip number 10, provide chafe protection for the tow line anywhere it touches the tow or towed boat. Old fire hose makes great chafe gear, but even something as simple as a fish towel, an old piece of canvas, or a t-shirt will work in a pinch. On the opposite side of the equation, always keep a sharp knife handy should you need to sever the tow line in the event of an emergency. Towing tip number 11, make the tow as smooth as possible for the towed vessel. Try different speeds to find the best speed for both the boat being towed and the conditions. And finally, tip number 12, never hesitate to decline offering a tow if circumstances make it unsafe. Bad weather, rough seas, your boat's too small, or any circumstances that would introduce an element of danger to you or the towed boat into the equation. The bottom line is that while you're obligated to provide as much help as possible in the event of an emergency, you also don't want to attempt something that's beyond your capabilities, a situation that could create a civil liability for you. If the crew is stranded but not in imminent danger, the most prudent course of action may be to simply stand by and provide moral support until a professional tow company arrives to assist.